Welcome to my channel. I would never have thought that this could happen to me. Don't repeat my mistakes. My name is Kathy. I'm 47 now, and looking back, I can see all few warning signs that I so stubbornly ignored. But love, or what I thought was love, makes you blind, doesn't it? You build a life based on what you believe is right, only to find out much later that the foundation you poured your heart into was always meant for somebody else. And sometimes that someone else is standing just a few feet away, watching, waiting about it. All started 18 years ago when I first met the Miller brothers, David and Bradley. They were both charming in their own way, but so very different. David, the older one, had a smooth, confident way about him. He was successful, always dressed in tailored suits, and never hesitated to take charge. The kind of man everyone noticed when he walked into a room. Bradley, on the other hand, well, he was quieter, softer around the edges. He had that boy next door look with warm brown eyes that always seemed to listen more than they spoke. He was the kind of man you could lean on. But back then, I didn't want to lean on. I wanted someone to sweep me off my feet. And David did just that. We dated for a whirlwind year before I proposed. And without giving it the careful thought it deserved, I said yes. Bradley congratulated us with a forced smile and a hug that lingered just a second too long. I remember feeling something stir in me when his arms wrapped around me. Something confusing, something I quickly pushed away. I never let myself dwell on it. Not then. Our wedding was a grand affair. David insisted on everything being perfect down to the imported white roses and the champagne fountain. Bradley was his best man. I remember him giving a short toast, saying how lucky his brother was to have found someone like me. There was a sadness in high sighs, a quiet ache I couldn't name at the time. I wish I'd understood it better back then. Fast forward 17 years, 17 long. Years filled with polite smiles, scheduled intimacy, and carefully managed expectations. David and I were more business partners than lovers. We shared a house, a bank account, and a calendar, but not much else. The passion had evaporated, and I was too proud and too afraid to admit I was lonely. Bradley was always around. He never married, never even introduced a Danian special. We'd see him during holidays, family barbecues, the occasional weekend visit when David needed help fixing something or wanted company to watch the game. He and I would chat while David grilled or watched football. Sometimes we laughed a little too hard. Sometimes his hand will brush mine and linger just a beat longer than necessary. Nothing ever crossed the line, but it danced right up to it. And then last winter, everything changed. David had to go on an extended work trip to Tokyo, 3 weeks overseas for a merger or something barely explained. He handed me the itinerary, kissed my cheek, and said, "Don't wait up." I didn't even argue. I was used to being alone by then. On the third night of his trip, the heater in the house broke. It was bitterly cold, and I didn't know what else to do. So I called Bradley. He showed up within 20 minutes. Bundled in a thick coat and carrying his old toolbox. When he walked into the house, I swear it felt warmer already. "Should have called me sooner," he said with the teasy smile of his, kneeling down North Basement stairs. I watched him work, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong, familiar arms. He'd always been good with his hands. I remembered when he built a swing, set for our niece in a single afternoon. He fixed the heater quickly, and as he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, I said without thinking, "Stay for dinner?" He hesitated, then nodded. We ate leftover stew and drank red wine. The conversation flowed so easily about nothing and everything. We laughed like old friends, but there was tension, a different kind of heat in the air. I felt it every time our knees brushed under the table. Every time we looked at a moment too long. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I lit a fire while he opened another bottle of wine. It felt too comfortable, too familiar, and too dangerous. I don't want to overstep, he said softly, his voice low. But I beg it to ask, are you happy with David? It was the first time anyone had a sked mat in years. I looked into High Size and something broke open in Sadim. I don't know anymore, I whispered. He nodded, his jaw tightening. He set these glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'd always wondered what would have happened if I told you how I felt. All those years ago, I stopped breathing. What? I barely got word out. I loved you, he said, his voice a little shakier now from the beginning. But David got to you first, and I thought, well, maybe you were happier with him than you'd ever be with me. So I let it go. The air between us crackled out all the years, all the tension, all the looks, the touches, the unsaid things that came rushing to the surface like a wave I couldn't hold back. I felt my heart pounding so loudly it was hard to hear anything else. I don't think I was ever happier with him, I said, my voice trembling, and then he kissed me. It wasn't hurried or desperate. It was careful, like he'd been imagining it for years and didn't want to get it wrong. His lips were soft, his touch gentle, and for the first time in so long, I felt seen. Not as a wife, not as Semyon's plus one, but as a woman, a whole woman full of desire and heart and longing. We didn't go further that night. I need you to understand that this wasn't about reckless impulse. It was about something deeper. We sat together by the fire, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. We talked and we remembered things we hadn't dared bring up in years. He told me about the time he almost confessed his feelings at our wedding rehearsal of all things. I told him about the way he used to watch him at family dinners, always wondering why he never brought Semyon to love. And now here we were, two people who had spent years dancing around a truth that neither one of us wanted to admit. That night didn't end in passion, but it did end in clarity. I had married the wrong brother, and for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The morning after Bradley left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, cradling my coffee like it could steady the storm unraveling inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, what I'd said, what had passed. Between us and the flicker of the firelight, it wasn't just an old crush resurfacing dot, it felt deeper than that. Like something he'd unknowingly buried was finally breathing again, and the guilt, God, the guilt. I wasn't the kind of woman who strayed. I had spent my whole life doing the right things. I married a man my family approved of. I supported his career. I kept the house in order, remembered birdies, played hostess during holidays, and never once let on how empty I had become inside. But what Bradley had given me last night wasn't betrayal. It was honesty, and I wasn't sure if that made it better. Or worse, the next few days were quiet. I kept myself busy cleaning out closets and refolding towels, all while trying not to replay every second of that night in my head. I didn't hear from Bradley, and part of me was grateful because I didn't trust myself not to feel too much too fast, but the other part missed him. Then David came back. I met him at the airport. He looked tired, distracted, more preoccupied with his phone than me. He gave me a kiss on the cheek, just like always, and then grumbled about the jet lag. We drove home in silence, the air between us thick with years of unspoken things. That night, as he unpacked, I watched him from the doorway of our bedroom. He was already talking about meetings and project deadlines, flipping through mails like he hadn't just been gone for 3 weeks, like I hadn't changed in that space he left behind. He didn't notice. I could have told him right then, could have stood there, looked him in the eye and said, something happened while you were gone, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I played the part I'd learned too well. I smiled. I nodded. I asked him about Tokyo. He barely looked up from his laptop. The next weekend was Bradley's birthday. David decided we should host a small dinner at our house. Just family, Hesed, already planning the menu without asking me, as if it was his birthday, not his brother's. He even assumed I'd love cooking. I didn't argue again, but when Bradley walked through the door that Saturday evening, something shifted. He looked at me like no one else in Theorem existed, not in a showy way, but in a way that made my breath catch, and when his hand brushed mine. As I passed him a glass off wine, I swear the floor trembled beneath me. We were both careful that night, polite, smiling, saying all the right things. But every glance, every pause between sentences carried weight. He saw through me. He always had, when dinner was over and guests had left. David disappeared into his office as he usually did, leaving me to clean up alone. I didn't mind. It was quiet, and the quiet gave me room to think. But then there was a knock on the back door. Turned, dish towel still in hand, and saw Bradley standing outside, his coat collar pulled up against the wind. "I love something," he said simply. I opened the door, letting him in. Hadn't say anything at first, just looked at me, and I looked right back. "You doing okay?" He finally asked, his voice low. I nodded, then shook my head. "No, not really." He stepped forward, not close enough to touch me, but close enough that I could feel his warmth again. "I meant what I said the other night, Kathy," he said. "I've carried this for years, and I'm not trying to ruin your life. I just needed you to know." I leaned against the counter, my chest tight. "You didn't ruin anything. You just made me realize how long I've been lying to myself." He looked down, then back up, his eyes fierce and steady. "You deserve more than this. You always did." Then he left again without asking for anything. No kiss, no promises, just truth hanging there between us like a thread waiting to be pulled. That night I sat in the dark, thinking about the life I'd built, about the choices I made at 29 that were still shaping my life at 47. I thought about David and how easily he slipped in and out of my world without ever seeing me. And I thought about Bradley, his hands, his voice, his truth, and the way he had made me feel more alive in one night than I had in years. A few days later, I told David I needed a break. It wasn't a dramatic scene. I didn't scream or cry. I simply told him that I needed space, that I needed to figure out who I was without just being his wife. At first, he didn't take it seriously. He brushed it off, assumed it was a phase, but I had already packed a bag. I went to stay with my sister in a nearby town just for a while. I told myself just long enough to breathe. One night, about a week into my break, Bradley called. I hadn't told him where I was, but he had always been good at finding me when I needed. "At most, I'm not calling to pressure you," he said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Wedded for hours and something in me shifted. This wasn't just about passion or longing or regret. It was about finally standing in front of someone and being seen fully, vulnerably, completely, and realizing that maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to want more than what I had settled for. That night, I stared at the ceiling in my sister's guest room, my fingers resting gently on my lips, still remembering the way his voice had wrapped around me like a blanket. I had married the wrong brother, and now I had to decide what I was going to do about it. I moved through those first few weeks like I was walking through fog. Everything familiar felt distant, and yet something inside me had never felt more awake. At my sister's place, I had space. Space to think, to breathe, to sleep in a bed that didn't carry the weight of years of emotional absence. The first few nights were restless, haunted by memories, and the sound of David's voice echoing in my head, practical, detached, predictable. Slowly the silence became comforting. I started journaling again. I took walks. I cooked just for myself, which felt oddly indulgent. And I thought about Bradley constantly. It wasn't just the night he kissed me or the way he confessed his feelings. It was everything about him, the gentle steadiness in his eyes, the way he listened without trying to fix me, the way I felt safe in his presence. For the first time, I was considering that maybe love, real love, wasn't supposed to be fireworks and grand gestures. Maybe it was supposed to feel like home. David called twice a day at first. The second week, it dropped to once. By the third, he sent a cold text. Let me know when you're done figuring things out. There it was. Quotation marks around my crisis. That was David in a nutshell. Heckle vent see beyond the surface of things. He wasn't cruel. Not exactly. He just wasn't curious about me, about us, about what I needed. For years, I told myself it was a not to have stability, but now that I had felt something more, I couldn't unfeel. It's at one chilly Saturday, I found myself driving through town without much of happening. I hadn't spoken to Bradley since our late-night phone call. I didn't know what he expected, or if he expected anything at all, but I found myself turning down the familiar street to his house, parking a few doors down like I was still afraid to be seen there. It knocked on the door. He opened it within seconds, like he'd been standing on the other side the whole time. He looked tired but warm, surprised but not startled. Hey, I said, me voice suddenly unsure. I don't know. You don't have to explain, he said gently. Come in. His house smelled like cedar and coffee. It always had. Simple, lived in, unpretentious. A few framed photos lined the hallway, his dog from years back, a fishing trip with his dad, a picture of the two of us at some long-forgotten family BBQ. My hand on his shoulder, both of us mulling. He led me to the living room, and we sat quietly at first. No rush. He let me take my time, and when I finally spoke, the words came easily. I'm not going back to him, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Are you sure? I'm tired of performing, I said. I've been performing for almost 2 decades, and now that I felt what it's like to really be with someone, I can't pretend anymore. He nodded, not pushing. I want whatever you want, Kathy, and I don't just mean now. I mean next year, 5 years from now. If that means just being in your life, Isa your friend, I'll do that. If it means more, then you have all of me. But if it's to be your choice, I could have cried right then, and there no expectations, no pressure. Just the purest, most grounded kind of love I'd ever been offered. I reached for his hand. I want to know you. I mean, really know you. All the things I never let myself learn because I was too busy chasing the wrong dream. He smiled, his thumb brushing mine. Then let's start now. We didn't rush into anything. Over the next few weeks, we met quietly. Coffee at a small place on the edge of town. Walks through the park after dark. He came to see me, my sisters, when I had the house to myself. Sometimes we just sat together and didn't say much at all. And then came the night that changed everything. It was raining, steady, and slow. We were curled up on the couch at his place, a soft blanket draped over us, the fire crackling low. We'd spent the evening talking about everything, childhood memories, what we believed about love, the lives we almost lived. He looked at me then, his hand warm on my thigh, and said, You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm not, I whispered. Not with you. I leaned in first this time. The kiss wasn't hesitant. It was full of everything I'd held back for years. His arms wrapped around me, and I sank into him like I belonged there. The warmth of his touch wasn't shocking or electric. It was right like my body had been waiting for this moment for far too long. What happened that night wasn't just physical. It was intimate in a way that felt sacred. He treated me with reverence as if every part of me was precious, cherished. He didn't rush. He listened to my breath, to my pauses, to my need to be seen, not just as a woman, but as me. Every touch was a conversation. Every glance an affirmation dot. We fell asleep, tangled together, the sound of rain still whispering against the windows. For the first time in years, I slept deeply, and when I woke, his arms were still around me. There was no regret, no fear, only peace. I looked over at him, his eyes still closed, his breathing steady, and realized something I never thought I'd feel. Again, I was loved, truly, wholly, and without condition, and I loved him back. Not because I was escaping something, but because I had finally found what I'd been searching for all along. Spring came early that year. I woke up one morning with the windows open, birds chirping outside and sunlight spilling across the sheets. Bradley was in the kitchen, humming quietly while making coffee, and for a brief moment it felt like I'd stepped into a different life, one where I'd always belonged in this house, one where I hadn't wasted years on the wrong path. I stood at the doorway, watching him stir milk into my mug the way I liked it. No sugar, just enough cream to turn it the color of sand. And I smiled. He turned around, saw me, and smiled too. A real smile, not polite, not forced, not the kind you wear for appearances, but the kind that reaches the eyes and sees, I see you, and I'm glad you're here. But outside this little bubble of warmth, life waited, complicated, messy life. David had gone from annoyed to distant to suspicious. He called a few times a week, asking vague questions. Then out of nowhere, had showed up at my sister's house. I wasn't there. She called me after he left. He went angry, she said. But he's starting to put pieces together. I think you need to talk to him. And she was right. So I did. I met him in a quiet cave one afternoon in a corner booth where no one could overhear us. He looked older than I remembered, tired, frustrated, but still buttoned up and composed in that way he always was. I didn't say hello, just leaned back and folded. His arms out, so he said, "You and Bradley?" I didn't lie. I nodded. He shook his head slowly, like he was disappointed but not surprised. I always knew he had a thing for you. I never even tried to hide it. I didn't respond. What was there to say? You couldn't have told me. His scared voice quiet but sharp. You couldn't have had the decency to end it first before running to my brother. I took a breath, steady and calm. David, I didn't leave you for Bradley. I left you because I hadn't felt like your wife in years. You just didn't notice or care, Tosk. That landed like a rock across the table. He looked away, jaw clenched. So hot now? You going to play house with him while the family whispers behind your back? I didn't flinch. Let them whisper. He stared at me for a long time. Yep, no, I never cheated on you. I believe it him. You didn't have to, I said softly. You just stopped loving me. Or maybe you never did in the way I needed. There was no big blow up, no tears. Just two people finally saying things out loud that had been buried for too long. We agreed to separate permanently. The legal part would follow, of course. Property division, paperwork, but emotionally it was already over. Not the strange thing was, I didn't feel relief right away. I felt grief. Not for him, but for the years I had stayed, waiting for something to come back that was never really there. Later that night, Bradley and I sat on his porch under the stars. I told him everything. He didn't gloat. He didn't say I told you so. He just held my hand, his thumb brushing the inside of my wrist. You sure you're ready for what comes next? He asked, eyes on the horizon. I haven't ever been more sure of anything, I said. That spring, we started building a life, not in secret, not in the shadows. But honestly, we told our families slowly and gently. Most were shocked. Some were supportive, and a few, like David's mother, were less than thrilled. But I didn't need everyone's blessing, just my own. We took it slow. I stayed in a small rental for a while before moving in with him. We cooked dinner together. We watched movies on the couch, my legs draped over his. We took road trips, small ones, to places we'd both passed by over the years but never visited. He showed me parts of himself I'd never known. His love of old blues music, his habit of sketching when heckled in sleep, his quiet fear of losing people. And I shared, too, the pain I hidden, the dreams I'd buried, the woman I used to be, and the woman I was becoming. We didn't need to be 20-some to fall in love. We just needed honesty, respect, and time. One night, we went back to the lake house F. Miller family used to rent every summer. Just the two of us this time. We sat on the old dock with our feet dangling over the edge, the water darkened still beneath us. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, watching the reflection of the stars shimmer. "Regret not telling you sooner," he hissed. I nodded. "Double quotes every day," he said. "But I don't regret where we are now, because I don't think we'd have appreciated it back then. We had to earn this, and we had." He kissed my shoulder, and I leaned into him, warm and safe. "So, no, I didn't cheat. I chose a man who saw me. I chose myself. And in doing so, I found a love that was quieter, deeper, more rooted than anything I thought I deserved. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the past. Viewed it was real. And I proved finally fully that I had married the wrong brother. But I also proved that it's never too late to find the right.